Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome you at today's online debate organized by the Institute for Politics and Society with the title Post-COVID Economic Recovery Strategies in the V4. My name is Blanka Kovacs and I will be moderating this debate today. Firstly, I would like to introduce our guest speakers. From Slovakia, we have Alexei Dobrolubov, Economic Advisor of the Vice Chairman of the Slovak National Council. From Hungary, please welcome Balázs Tepesi, Head of the School of Economics and Business Research Center at Matthias Corvinus Collegium, founder of the Hit for Research Institute, and former Deputy State Secretary for Economic Development. Our Czech speaker is Lukáš Kovanda, who is the Chief Economist at Trinity Bank, member of the National Economic Council of the Czech government, senior socio-economic analyst at the United Nations, and lecturer at the University of Economics in Prague. And from Poland, please welcome Tomasz Kasprowicz, managing partner at the Gemini IT company, vice president at Respublica Nova, and editor at Liberty magazine, and also independent lecturer and trainer. Thank you all for accepting our invitation, and I would like to encourage everyone from the audience to ask questions in the comment section below the live stream of the Facebook. So the COVID-19 global pandemic had severely affected the societies, economies, and healthcare systems around the world, and there is no end in sight for the virus. The most important thing now is to share know-how and good practices between the countries and help each other during this hardship. At today's discussion, we will address the post-COVID economic recovery of the countries, the V4 countries, and specifically the national recovery and resilience plans of the countries and the rising inflation. And if time allows, we will also talk about the financial aspects of the mandatory vaccination. In the first session of our debate, I will ask each of our guests to talk about how the pandemic affected their country's economy. So please, Mr. Kasprowicz, could you give us your introductory remarks and introduce the Polish economic experience?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, Poland was hit by the COVID crisis relatively not much. Of course, we had the first recession in 30 years, so that's clearly something to reckon with, but the impact wasn't very large. This came from several sources. One of them was that the government rolled out pretty generous support plan for most of the economy. Some say too generous, and we are paying for this generosity right now with very high inflation rate, one of the highest in the European Union. But this allowed to preserve most of the economic tissue of the country, and of course, besides of the very badly hit hotels and restaurants, which suffered greatly everywhere, this didn't have that much influence on the economy as a whole, especially that the structure of our economy was actually benefited by the COVID to some extent, as certain products, especially furniture, were in a high demand during the pandemics as people started furnishing their home offices. So that was one of those elements that actually helped out quite a bit. Polish economy was actually in not that bad of a shape during and after the pandemics. Of course, we are awaiting the recovery plan to help out with the recovery. This, of course, is associated with problems because of the ongoing tensions with European Union and its institutions. So this money is not flowing yet, and it could have been. And we don't have really inside the point when the money will be coming in. This is paired with the political situation in Poland, where there are tensions within the governing party, where the most extreme wing of this party is trying to derail current prime minister, and it's doing it by maintaining very hard anti-European Union stance that is not allowing to make any agreements. And length of those agreements is actually impacting the prime minister. So this is kind of inter-party politics that is actually making the whole thing much more difficult. One more thing I would like to mention is that one of the big successes is definitely the fact that we do not have very high unemployment rate. The unemployment remained very low through the pandemics and is still pretty low. This is not only due to the rollout of the government plans. This was also and mainly the result of demographic shift that we are having in Poland, and in general the lack of labor force, lacking labor force. This was the process we've seen before the pandemics to start, with very low unemployment, very high wages growth, and surprisingly, through the pandemics we didn't see any wages decline, but still the growth. Which spells problems when the recovery will hit, because there will be not enough workers to kickstart the economy. We are traditionally counting on large influx of migrants from Ukraine and Belarus, but we cannot be sure whether this will happen or not.
Thank you. Mr. Dobrulobov, could you continue by telling us about Slovakia?
My open remarks, the economic situation for Slovakia is, I think, very common for the same like in all countries before. We don't have a very high unemployment rate. It was okay. I think the COVID crisis see that the Slovak government. The government infrastructure is very weak. It showed the problem with digitalization when people have to healthcare things manage in our government buildings. That were big problem. It shows the problem with lack of the physician, lack of the nurseries. This type of problem shows our clerks cannot work in very flexible way of working. That shows all the problem that our government was under investment in I think not in the hardware but in the software. So our digitalization shows is very weak when we need it and stuff like that. So it looks like that our government have to make it much more things to professionalization and making the digital government or something like that. If I can say, that's the first thing. The economic, it's good in Slovakia. We know everybody here that the main problem isn't coming here, and of course it was big problem from political view. I think that every government here have a big problem with what to do during the pandemic crisis. It was big political cost for government in power. In Slovakia, it was our prime minister Igor Matovič was changed to Eduard Heger, only 1 year after election. So it shows it was very hard to. If I can say one more thing is that many political capital was invested to the high political cost laws to stop the pandemic and not to the reforms, because we have to in Slovakia, part of our recovery fund is to approve many hard laws. So many political capital was invested here into that.
Thank you. Mr. Kovanda, could you tell us about the Czech economy during COVID?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to this session. And I have similar remarks as my colleagues, because our economy, of course, have enjoyed very low unemployment rate still. We have the lowest unemployment rate in the OECD countries, even lower than Japan. So we have been pretty successful in the terms of slashing unemployment rate, or we were successful in keeping it at a very low number, but it comes with a price, and the price is bigger and bigger public debt compared to our GDP. So even though we were successful, and we have been successful in deploying various programs to save positions and to save employment, we have done it through a growing debt, and it poses a problem for the future. And now with the new government, I think the major issue for it is to handle the growing public debt. But this is not just the case of the Czech Republic itself. I think it's more common. I think other countries in V4 group have had similar problems. But the truth is that the debt, public debt compared to GDP in the Czech Republic has grown one of the fastest paces in European Union and in the world. The other thing is that our debt has been growing from a very low base. So the base before the pandemic hit was the fourth lowest in the European Union. So we have some room to increase the debt, but still there is a major challenge for the coming government to somehow consolidate public finances and to make it sustainable for the decades coming. As we are, as other countries in V4, demographically aging, we have been facing necessity of reforming our pension system and of reforming our healthcare, financing our public healthcare system. So these two reforms, I think, are biggest challenge for this government and maybe for the governments in the future. And the pandemic situation has made it even more urgent to face or tackle these issues and somehow reform these major public domains. In terms of our GDP growth, last year was the worst in the country's history. So the recession or the decline of the debt or the GDP growth was the highest or most significant in the whole history of the Czech Republic since 1993. Even the pandemic crisis was for us last year even worse than the financial crisis of 2009. It's not the case in all European countries, and we are hit currently as well. So we have problems not just with the last year, but with the current as well now because of the inflation. As was mentioned already, inflation in Czech Republic is somehow different from inflations in many other countries of the European Union because there is a strong core inflation. So even without electricity and food prices, we have had a very strong inflation. So that's the reason why our central bank, Czech National Bank, has been very tough in the last few months to combat inflation. So it has made very significant hikes in interest rates, and we are awaiting other hike next week when there is a last meeting of our national bank this year. And this is, until now, it hasn't had effect for the inflation, unfortunately, because inflation is one of the highest, again, in the history of Czech Republic. And we expect in January this year, because of energy prices, especially, inflation to climb to even 10%, which would be the highest inflation rate since 1998. And it poses a problem for many households in the Czech Republic for the next year. So I think the next year will be very difficult for Czech Republic and for Czech households. And then in the year after, I think there will be some stabilization of inflation, and I hope, will be enjoying pretty stable path from the current situation, from the pandemic year, from the inflationary pressures we are facing right now. So I'm optimist, but not for the next year. I think it will be quite difficult, as I said.
Thank you. And Mr. Szapasi, please continue with the Hungarian economic experience.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. First, I think that from economic perspectives, Hungary, similar to other countries we spoke about, was relatively lucky because to get a crisis in very good economic times is better than to get the crisis when you have economic programs at all. In Hungary, the big financial crisis in 2008-9 caused deep problems. But that time we had a relatively worse economic situation even before the crisis. I think it's the good news in the bad news. That we were in good position. We had a good impetus when the crisis arrived into our countries. This is the first issue. The second issue, that it has an enormous price. We just started to pay it. As we calculated, it's more than 14 billion euros, or even more. That we will lack somehow, somewhere, either the state or the companies or the families. So I think that the crisis will have long-lasting effects because at first everyone was happy that we are over, we survived the first wave, then the second wave, the third wave, and who knows what will happen. But when these waves will be over, hopefully, then the lack of income must be somehow managed. I think that will be the core issue the next years. Our micro numbers are very similar, like the other V4 countries. The recession in the first year was deeper, but this year seems to be better than the others. We have the inflation problem again. Similarly to yours, it will be in this year around 5%, a little bit more, and the public debt increased also. But I think that the Hungarian public debt data is a little bit tricky in this case because of our constitutional arrangement. We have a rule that that it constitutionally forbidden to increase the public debt when our economy is increasing. So what happened in Hungary, that we could see that the crisis management will have costs in next year too, but we had to increase the debt in the year of the crisis. So that makes numbers a little bit tricky. But in this debt issue, the difference between Hungary and your country is that we had a higher level. and approximately the Hungarian public debt before the crisis was more than 65%. That's 2 times more than the Czech, and at 1/4 more than the Polish and the Slovak. So that's a little bit more serious issue. The employment situation was very good in Hungary. The Hungary had the best ever years of economy before the crisis, 7 good years, as I like to say, and we had a huge employment increase, and companies wanted to keep the people because they know that they will lack them after the crisis. So we didn't have problem with employment and wages in general. Finally, I want to share you an interesting fact. We had research on the impact of crisis on companies, small companies. We had deep interviews with 50 smaller firms, and we asked all of them that what should have been done in a different way. We asked it because no one knew at the first moment that there will be more than one wave of coronavirus. And interestingly, more than 90% of the respondents said that everything was okay. We did it exactly in the right way. So what is very interesting for me, that it was maybe the first crisis in a long time when economic actors become more confident, and they saw that, okay, it was tough, but we did it. So I like to be optimistic. I think that maybe this crisis will have the positive effects on the way of thinking, that it can not only harm us, that we have to pay a lot, but it makes us also more strong and increases our resilience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I would like to move to the second question, which is related to the national recovery and resilience plans of the countries. As we know, the EU is allocating extraordinary funds to support the recovery of the member states, and most of the countries have already sent their national recovery and resilience plans for approval. So what are the priorities of your countries in using the money? According to your opinion, Mr. Komanda, will this be used correctly in the Czech Republic?
Thank you for that question. Our priorities here in the Czech Republic, I think, are pretty much aligned with the priorities of the European Union or European Commission, because priority number 1 here in the Czech Republic is green transition, and priority number 2 is digital transition. So these are 2 fields that are really our priorities when tapping the funds, recovery funds, but especially the green transition, I think, will be especially difficult in the Czech Republic compared to many other countries of the European Union, as we are most industrialized country or economy in the European Union, and industrial production has had a high share of our gross output or gross value added, and we have to somehow reform, and very quickly reform, this industrial structure that is to a large extent still quite old industrial structure based in 20th century still, and we have to manage somehow to escape from this trap of past time, and it will be really difficult. So we have to reform or restructure or make a restructuralization of industrial regions of northern Bohemia and northern Moravia, which are pretty much dependent on coal production. And as you know, this coal should be or shall be eliminated completely. And we currently do not have any plan how to make for this losing of employment and economic output even. So this is really a threat. And second threat for us is our strong dependency on automotive, because next to Slovakia, we are the second country in the world in terms of cars produced per capita. Now maybe this year it's a bit different because of the COVID crisis and semiconductor shortages, global semiconductor shortages. But still, we are very much dependent and dangerously dependent, I would even say, on automotive production. So next to the reform of the coal production and old industries here in the Czech Republic, we have to somehow quicken our transition from the automotive with the traditional combustion into probably electromobiles production, but it will be very difficult. And I think we won't be anymore global power in terms of car production, even if we try this, if we manage this transition successfully, because there are competitors in electromobility in China, in Asia, in United States. So I think in general, Europe will not be able to keep its position in automotive with the advent of the electromobility. So it will it means for the Czech Republic a huge challenge, and we have to use the European money, the funds, recovery funds money, to lessen the impact of these transitions that are pretty difficult for our economy that is so much dependent on industrial production and automotive.
Thank you. Mr. Dobrulubov, the Slovak recovery plan was criticized by some as they claimed that it was kind of a reform menu rather than being a specific list of investment projects. So what do you think of this?
Of this plan? Philosophy of our recovery plan comes from analytical papers prepared by Slovak government think tankers. So it has been thoroughly discussed for a long time ago, and Slovakia had a clear picture of what is needed and what we want from the scratch. The top priorities, like in every country in our recovery plan, is similar to others: are education, science, economy, healthcare, and green economy, of course. Although our recovery plan was very well prepared, the implementation will be very hard. One of the main reasons is many parts of the plan are not politically popular. For example, the education area. We understand that the reform in our education system is necessary. We need more transparency in higher education system. Currently, universities work in every closed matter. There is little oversight, and it's our world its own. As part of the education reform, is a higher level of oversight will be established. This creates for fear on the university sides, of course, and a lot of tension. The second political problem is our healthcare reform, which is very important. But under proposed measures, hospitals are not efficient and will be closed. So it is for local government good political points to fight keeping hospitals in the cities. same is for judicial reform. Many cities will be without courts, and it's making big trouble to approve reform. And I think the biggest problem which we come to, I think, under the plan in the next 2 years, it is desegregating schools, mainly in the eastern Slovakia, from people from disadvantaged communities. And it's for political will, I think that everybody agreed about that. It's the bomb, of course. And how I say on the start, this session, that many political capital was fired to fight against the COVID. It was very hard measures here in Slovakia, and our government is not very popular now. So it will be very hard to approve this part of plans. Overall plan is good, but success depends on political will to follow through. If you have any other questions, please.
I will, but first I would like to ask Mr. Szapasi to elaborate shortly on these recovery and resilience plans of Hungary. Thanks. Oh, Mr. Szapasi, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm here with you. So at first, the National Recovery Plan is not alone. It goes together with the plan for the structure of funds and with the national budget. So I think that sometimes it's tricky that if we look at the National Recovery Plan as an original program, because it's not an original program. It's a part of the public programs of the government in general. So I think in a way it's a political marketing issue that we speak about program priorities for this country or that country, and we try to compare them, because I worked on several times on structural fund planning. All governments try to optimize the allocation of funds from different program channels. So I think it's an important issue. The other important issue is that this scheme, this National Recovery Program stuff, has a great loan component. We will see what will happen at the end, but I think that for our countries, it's not the best issue to have this money. I think that this money is a little bit cheaper than these countries individually could get, so it has smaller loans. But this money is not so cheap. We look at what are the administrative costs, the political constraints, and so on and so on and so on to use it. I think that, as I know the European Union, the scheme of the implementation will be very similar to the structural funds. The same audit structures, the same logic will happen, and the administrative compliance cost of structural funds money is more than 5%. So I think that if we look at the smaller interest rates together with this high compliance and administrative costs, then the balance is not so straightforward. And at second, all of us mentioned that it's a big problem that public debt increased. And we get used to this public debt is not such a big problem because we lived in the last 10 years in the year of extremely cheap money because of the permanent fiscal expansion of the European Union, United States, Japan, and all the small national banks follow this path too. And if it will be over, then public debt will be a serious issue again. So to build the recovery of Europe on indebtedness, I'm not sure that it's a good strategy. So I think it's very good to learn from the Japanese. They have excellent cars and nice robots and beautiful cartoons. but I think that in this debt-based finance of modeling growth is not. I'm not so happy about. This is in general. If you look at the Hungarian program, more than half of the money goes to human issues, health, 1/3 of the money, employment, mostly vocational training and education, 1/10 of the money, and elementary school, 1/10 of the money, and transport, of course, green transport, because we like only things that are green, is 25% of the money, and 10% for energy. These are the bugs. We have the projects, we have the programs that we could finance from it. It's an issue. I think that in Hungary it's a great issue to spend more money on health and education. I think it can be a general policy in our countries, because the last years increased the value of people. Companies want to hire more and more people, even if it costs more, and the value of life, if we can express it in wages, increase also for families. So I think that more investment in people is really an important stuff, because we invest in an asset that has an increasing value in general. And what is important in this recovery plan, that we have to somehow to make it in accordance with the goals of the Green Europe, with the decarbonization. Hungary is committed in this field. So I think that altogether, this program is only a bucket of money. But I think that how we put together our programs into this bucket, that somehow symbolizes that people are important. We have to improve our infrastructures, and we are on the track with the green issues of Europe.
Thank you. So, Mr. Kasparovich, could you tell us about the priorities of the Polish recovery plan?
I wish I could, but I'm not sure anybody knows what they are. That might be the biggest problem of everything. That is hardly surprising. The governments were given not that much time to prepare those plans in general. And let's say the governments in our part of the woods are not probably the most efficient or professional ones. So basically, the plan consists of a lot of programs that were being collecting dust in some shelves in the ministries for quite a while, and they will put together to fashion something to absorb the money. I cannot really say with clear conscience that we have exactly the ideas and the priorities exactly as European Union. But it's clearly constructed to look so. Let me give you some numbers. Let's say the digital transformation, that's supposed to consist of at least minimum 20% of the plan. Polish plan is 20.9%. What about the climate spending? Well, the climate spending should be at least 37%. And the Polish spending is 37.7%. So this is clearly an indication that this was all fashioned, capped, and put together exactly to fit those criteria that were given. But clearly, upon closer inspection, you can find out that things that are allocated to those priorities, you can easily question whether this is really this priority or something to make look like, which makes this plan quite a weak point in case the Polish government wants to fight it with Commission, because it's clearly quite easy to show that this plan does not fit the minimum requirements that were given by European Union. There are, however, certain themes in the plan that you can see, and those themes go in the following way. First of all of the control to the central government. It means there is a lot of programs that are basically distributed by the discretion of the central government, which is supposed to increase the power of central government, especially with respect to local governments that are mostly governed by the opposition, especially in the cities. So this is a way to squeeze a little bit of the opposition out of the political posts and kind of give rewards to the places that they decided to go with the current governing part. So that's part of it. Second part of it is that little money actually goes for the investment for the companies. In general, there are clearly insufficient funds for digital transformation, clearly insufficient funds for investment in the small companies, in the medium companies, even in the large private companies. But there's a huge allotment for very few large state-owned companies. So again, a lot of money under the control of the certain central government that is controlling those companies. So this is basically the main thing that you can see here, all the power to the central government and a lot of discretion, which arises a lot of suspicion and take into consideration the events from the past when the government was again discriminating against regions that are supporting the opposition. Also seeing what was done in Hungary before, because those things that are done in Poland are not invented in Poland, they're mostly imported from Hungary anyway, in one or the other form. So this is also one of the concerns of European institutions about whether without the judiciary control, independent judges, this money can be allotted to Poland because there is a fear of misappropriation of the funds. Again, something that was seen in the Hungary and is a huge problem in the Hungary. So clearly, European Union does not want to make the same mistakes twice, especially taking into consideration that the amount of money, the share volume of money going to Poland is huge and much bigger than the one going to the Hungary. So this is going to be definitely a standoff for a while. So what are the priorities? I would say the number one priority for the government is to keep as much money as possible under the control of the government. So that's the priority number one. The rest is didaskalia, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to ask some country-specific questions now. First, Mr. Dobrolubov, is the fact that Slovakia is a part of the Eurozone advantages or disadvantages for the country's economic recovery?
Please pardon, could you say me the question once again? I didn't catch up all of that.
Yes, sorry. So is the fact that that Slovakia is part of the Eurozone is advantageous or disadvantages for the country's economic recovery?
From it's a big advantage now because our rates are still very low. So there's a big difference, I think, with Czech Republic. I think my colleague Lukáš Komada said that it was some spike in the interest rates by Czech National Bank. So my view, it is big advantage. So we are here, and I think that the inflation is all of the problem, all the West world, all of the advanced world. So it's maybe better world, and I think that our governments should be, especially in Slovakia, don't make it any measurement which will be worsening the situation, like rising the value-added taxes, something like that, or some high pressure on companies to higher costs for something which will be shifted to the customers. So it is inflation things. So I think I think it is for my answer on your question. It is an advantage being in the European Union because we have a still very good interest rate in here, Slovakia, but it is pros and cons, of course. And if you have some question, please.
I would like to ask Mr. Kovanda if Czechia. So I think you mentioned that in Czechia needs to rebound its economic growth, but at the same time it needs to introduce profound changes to the automotive industry and to the energy sector as well. So could you tell us about that a little bit more?
Yes, thank you for that question. We have really to make our industry more resilient because of the coming future trends, and still I think we are not competitive enough now to be able to withstand these new pressures and new challenges. So we have to somehow redesign our industrial production. I do not think that we should go outside of the industrial production, for example, into services, because in terms of the share on our gross value added, we have one of the lowest share of services in the European Union, next to Romania, I guess. But I think that's not so much problem. I think the biggest challenge is really how to modernize our industrial production, our manufacturing. And this should be, I think, main aim of this new government check that starts today, and of course the future governments as well, because I think it's a longer term issue, not just for 4 years or 6 years, but for 10 or 15 years. And of course we have to use the European money, but I think we are lacking a vision how to do it and what should be our priorities. And in my opinion, that may not pose a big problem, but the government should be here, especially to create conditions for it, and it may create these conditions successfully, especially when it has a vision for what is creating the good conditions. So I mean by the creating condition, especially creating infrastructure, not just roads and highways and railways for speed trains, that's necessity, but also digital infrastructure. And then something I call human infrastructure, and by that I mean that we should really invest more into education, and we should be able to really have here qualified workforce, and I think that's not the case today. Because in many international comparisons, Czech education attainments are getting down or are worsening compared, for example, to Asian countries. And that's not just problem of the Czech Republic, of course. I think that's issue in many other European Union countries, but we should be more open and more active, especially in the technical education, because of course it's very important and necessary for creating a modern industrial or manufacturing economy that we should be creating in the Czech Republic in the coming years, I guess. So I think government should create a condition in terms of infrastructure, human infrastructure and technical, physical infrastructure, and then to make conditions for entrepreneurship as free as possible. And then I think we can enjoy prosperity and growth in coming decades.
Blanka, you're muted.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. So, Mr. Szepesi, Hungary signed a long-term gas supply deal with Russia. Will this result in the Hungarian economy becoming too dependent?
Please, one more time. I couldn't get all the words.
I'm sorry, muted.
Please repeat the question.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, my internet is unstable, but can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I was asking that Hungary signed a long-term gas supply deal with Russia, and will this result in the Hungarian economy becoming too dependent on Russia?
I think that if Hungarian economy is dependent on Russia, then German economy is dependent on Russia too. Because if you look at the gas consumption of European countries, even in the time when the northern gas production is decreasing, it's Russia that produces the gas for all the countries. Someone buys it on the market from day to day, and some makes long-term contract. I think it's a kind of economic rationality, what kind of contract to do. I think that in these days, we can say that it was a good decision to make this long-term contract, because both our gas supply is there, and the price is in a path that is more moderate to buy it on the market. I think that I am not an expert on gas issues, but you know that Nord Stream 2, if it will work, then the problem of our region will be not that oh my gosh, we have to use Russian gas. We have to use Russian gas, but the problem will be that most of this gas will come through Germany. And I think that we are in German dependence, because all of our car industries, our industries are part of the German industry mostly. We are dependent on Russia because we got gas from there. And I think that it's useful to manage these dependencies separately. So if there is one big guy and there is another big guy, it's better to deal with them in a way that they are not together. And I think that in my view, this long-term contract is important for us, because it means that we now made an agreement with Russia directly, and not with all the other actors who will be involved in the gas transfer in the next years, and the Nord Stream will start to work.
Thank you. And we have time for one last question. So, Mr. Kasparovich, as you mentioned before, the Polish economy was performing well during COVID, and also you mentioned that it is experiencing one of EU's highest inflations. So, how exactly can the country manage that?
Well, the problem here is that, of course, there are kind of outside reasons for inflation for all of the countries. All of the countries experience that, mostly due to supply side perturbation we've seen. But the Polish central bank, that is heavily under the control of governing party, was steadfastly keeping the very low interest rates. And even when neighboring countries, Hungary, Czechia, started increasing interest rates, our central bank was saying, no, this inflation is just a temporary issue. It will go down, and we should not change our monetary policy. And even during the summer, that was the case. Only in the fall, when the inflation was going up, and we are hovering around 8% currently, we see that the inflation is not willing to go down. Even if some of the parts of it are temporary shocks, we are in a situation where we are starting having the spiral of inflation, meaning the workers are demanding compensation for the inflation, and then of course this compensation increases prices, costs, which increases the prices, and on it goes. So we are at the first step of going into the quite problematic issue of rising inflation due to the internal factors. So not only the factors going from the outside, but because of the outsized wages growth, which for several quarters now is higher than GDP growth, or higher than labor efficiency growth, which must lead to the inflation all in all. So we are after 2 interest rate hikes that are higher than what was expected. So the central bank is kind of eating its own tongue and backing up from whatever they were saying and changing it. And we are expecting even more hikes. But this, of course, brings other problems, like increasing installments and payments on the debt, not only the state debt. And we already heard the problems that may occur for the budgets when the cost of debt will increase, and the supposedly unlimited amount of debt will no longer be unlimited, and the countries are heavily in debt after the crisis. But this is also problematic for regular people that took some loans for real estate and others for investments even. And now those installments are going up due to the rates going up. And this is just the beginning of the story if we want to stop the inflation in its tracks, and doesn't seem that we have any other choice, because if this spiral gets out of the control, the cost of putting such inflation down is huge. We already had that in the early 90s, and everybody remembers how unpleasant that is. So what the central bank is doing, that's the only thing the central bank could be doing. But it's unpleasant also politically, taking into consideration that the governing party is losing its support in the recent months.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we don't have time for another question. So please allow me to thank our speakers who participated in today's debate. Alexei Dobrolobov, Economic Advisor of the Vice Chairman of the Slovak National Council, Balázs Szepesi, Head of the School of Economics and Business Research Center at Matthias Corvinus Collegium, Lukács Kovanda, Chief Economist at Trinity Bank, and Tomáš Kasporovič, Managing Partner at Gemini IT Company. So ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed the debate, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And once again, thank you very much for joining us today, and have a great day and Merry Christmas to all.